A proposal to build 2,000 houses over 2 decades in Porirua is desperately needed. But at what cost? One of the developers has pleaded guilty to doing environmental damage in the Hutt Valley years ago, but says he still doesn't believe he did anything wrong. More than 100 submissions have been made on the proposed development, which sits directly across from a protected wetland. And a streamlined process means that once it's signed off by the Environment Minister, there is essentially no way to appeal the decision through the Environment Court. Rachel Thomas reports.
New Zealand desperately needs houses, and Malcolm Gillies wants to build 2,000 of them in Porirua. He wants to build the properties on 350 hectares of land on Plimerton Farm, which sits on the east side of State Highway 1 and looks over rolling hills and the Porirua harbour.
Our vision out there is to develop an integrated subdivision with a number of different typologies, so that there's basically houses for everyone, and with a view to making the most of the landform, and at the same time, there's 346 hectares there, and only half of it in the end will be actually developed into housing. The rest will be walkways, retired into native bush or large farming lots.
The site is currently farmland. The Porirua City Council is allowing the plan to go through a streamlined planning process, which speeds up the consenting process to rezone the land from rural to urban to allow the build to begin. Directly across the highway is a protected wetland known as Taupo Swamp. Plimerton local Bill McCauley is the chair of Friends of Taupo Swamp and Catchment, a group which has spent years planting trees and clearing blackberries from the wetland. He says there's no way the development won't create runoff into the wetland.
What's proposed on the hills behind is that the soil will be taken off the top of the ridges, building platforms created, and inevitably sediment will come off there and run down into the main stream that's over here to my left. So that concerns us greatly as to how you can prevent that kind of sedimentation.
One of his key concerns is about Malcolm Gillies. Bill McCauley says he's done damage in the past.
The developer doesn't have a great track record. You've got a question, is that a suitable person to be involved in development of such a sensitive area as this?
In 2013, Malcolm Gillies pleaded guilty to disturbance and excavation of 4 Hutt River tributaries and was fined $15,000. He says one of his contractors ran over a stream that was hard to see.
I think it was a very minute infringement, quite frankly. We pleaded guilty because that's what happened, but in my mind it was a nothing.
The document from Greater Wellington Regional Council puts it quite differently, saying a significant amount of vegetation was cleared from the site and excavation work had been done on the beds, which meant sediment made its way into the water. RNZ asked Malcolm Gillies how the public could be sure this wouldn't happen again.
Well, I learnt from that, you can't take any risks at all. I didn't do it, someone that worked for me, and I took responsibility. We've made sure now that the processes that we've put in place don't allow for things like that to happen.
But, it sounds to me like you don't think there was anything that went wrong there.
I don't.
Well, so then how can you say you've learned from it?
Well, I've learnt the process that, when you come to something being a stream, that's purely, in a difference of opinion.
The Department of Conservation opposes the current plan in part, citing concerns about runoff into the swamp and catchment and roading through significant natural areas. Its National RMA Manager, Amy Robinson, says DOC wants tighter controls.
The policy is too permissive and allows destruction of native habitat without appropriate controls. So DOC is seeking better protection for Indigenous biodiversity at the site. If we get it right at the plan phase, then that sets up what the consenting regime will be, and then we can potentially argue for things to be prohibited or more tightly controlled.
As New Zealand has already lost 90% of its wetlands, Bill McCauley says we can't take any for granted.
Our belief is that this is not an appropriate area to be putting a intense urban area like that, because this is it's rare for there to be any wetlands left in the Wellington area. There's only something like 2% of the original wetlands in the Wellington area, And so every square metre counts to protect what's here.
The Environment Minister, David Parker, would not comment on whether he was aware of Malcolm Gillies' previous environmental conviction and the appropriateness of using the streamlined planning process. In a statement, he pointed out he had ordered that an expert in sedimentation be on the hearings panel. The Porirua City Council says it's currently preparing a report on the submissions and declined to comment while that's underway. For Checkpoint, Rachel Thomas.